Thank you for joining us again. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
We are still talking about this role-playing game we're creating. It's called Downbelow, and the setting is, well, take it as you will.
If you like what you've heard so far about the setting, by the way, first, please ask us more questions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, and maybe you'd like to throw a couple of pennies in the hat over on Patreon, where we are still building up steam to provide even more information, get some stuff written down, and basically, let's make a full-time project out of this.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, Steve, I got a question for you.
I got an answer for you.
So...
4.
That's not really what I'm going for.
But it was an answer.
It was a reply.
Okay.
So, in most cyberpunk settings, the criminals, as we've said before, are the outsiders, and sometimes really the good guys because they are the outsiders. But in Downbelow, organized crime especially, which is often part of that counterculture in most cyberpunk, is actually part of the establishment. Mob bosses and people who work for them are basically the man. They're not official, they're not officially recognized by states or megacorps, which are other representations of the man, but they're still pretty much the man. What gives with that? Why did we make that choice?
All right, so first off, buckle up, because this one's got a few different answers. So I'm going to start with a couple of things. First off, let's face it, if you have played role-playing games, organized crime and the underworld is already part of the system. This actually goes all the way back to the introduction of stuff like thieves' guilds in classic role-playing games, Dungeons & Dragons possibly being the first, where they were invented for several reasons, one of which was to help regulate illegal activities among the player characters by giving them a system to which even they must answer. Also to answer the question of, like, why aren't these cities overrun by high-level rogues? Answer, for some strange reason, they've put their wits together and decided that they will divvy it up and rob only on organized nights and so forth. Moving on to other cyberpunk systems.
Answers come up with by people who didn't bother to do their research.
Right. But even then...
still, things that were made up and they ended up making sense in their own way.
Exactly. But even then, you go into various cyberpunk systems and situations, and the underworld, the mob bosses, organized crime in general, that's the system with which the players interact the most, and that becomes the system. Maybe not the man, but they're acting like the man, because you're just as afraid of stepping wrong on the mob boss's turf as you are of stepping wrong on the government's turf.
Possibly more so, because these guys are actually in your turf.
And so on and so forth. Pretty much name a game in which players do anything remotely shady, and they're interacting with the underworld as its own system. Maybe it's part of the counterculture, but it's part of the established counterculture. Maybe not the capital E establishment, but it's established. So, in looking at the utopian flavor, which we actually discussed several days ago, some of the reasoning behind the making it a functional utopia, in keeping with the utopian flavor, let's take it a step further. Let's actually say, okay, they're already functionally part of the system, and even if you look at something like the series currently running, Gotham, the organized crime is so entrenched in Gotham City that the police already treat it as part of the system. They treat it as established. Why not take that a step further? Let's actually make it functionally recognized as establishment. Outside of the main setting of Waiver Parody, so this is less true wherever you go. Some places it's almost true, some places it's practically not true. But on the default setting of Waiver Parody, so the mob bosses are part of the establishment for an in-system, in-world reason and an out-of-world reason. The out-of-world reason is the meta reason of they already were. We're just making it legitimate. The in-world reason is something similar in Nuevo Parody, so it's a government cobbled together by people who are trying to keep themselves together, and when you have someone who is going to naturally step forward and say, I have a vested interest in keeping people together, certain sureties are offered, certain sureties are accepted, and before you know it, organized crime is now an official and recognized, maybe unofficially, but recognized part of your local municipal government, and not just in an everyone knows it sense. Everyone really does know it.
We've touched before on how Yggdrasil didn't want to be running a city so much as they wanted to just build a space elevator, and they ended up with a city-state. So one role, for example, that the mob has filled in Nuevo Paradiso's dark streets is law enforcement, keeping the peace. Because although they don't actually explicitly enforce any set of laws that were voted on or put in place by anybody in particular, they keep people from randomly murdering each other and stealing from each other, except in such ways as the bosses get a cut and in amounts that the bosses think doesn't rock the boat.
And even then, when it comes to burglary and theft, in general, it's probably safer to think of organized crime more like farmers than raiders. They are, by and large, way more interested in a consistent stream of steady profits than in one or another great windfall. Sure, they'll occasionally organize or sanction thefts. Sure, there are impulsive moments where especially lower-ranking members will act out in a moment of sudden crime.
And they'll protect their own from retribution in such instances.
In general, in a Yakuza-controlled territory, they're going to take a very dim view of random yahoos or even street gang members who are bursting into convenience stores to steal things because those convenience stores are paying steady protection money to the Yakuza in order to, well, maintain peaceful operation. And that's not going to look good if the Yakuza don't do something about it. So they're going to take a dim view. They're going to act as protectors of the peace, and they're going to cultivate their crop so that the slow, steady income can keep coming in and keep them feeling perfectly fine.
And while they'll protect their own from outside retribution, if somebody on the inside of their organization is doing something against the organization's interests, there will be consequences.
Yep. So there you have it. Those are a couple of thoughts on philosophy as to why exactly organized crime is a fairly legitimate part of the system in this version.
And depending on your politics, you might think there's not that much difference between organized criminals and governments in the first place, and their origins have interesting historical links, but we don't really have the time to talk about that in this context.
Nor are we trying to make a political statement here. This is not something about one or the other of us actually specifically having the views. This is just about constructing the world.
So we'll talk to you more about philosophies behind why we represent things in this story a certain way, and we'll come back to you with that in future episodes.
Until next time, thanks for falling through the cracks with us.